Jerusalem destroyed, in ruins, conquered by one man. In 586 BC, the most sacred city in the world, Jerusalem, was destroyed without mercy. Its temple, its walls, its strength, everything was reduced to rubble. Jerusalem, the symbol of God's people's faith and identity, was brought down by one man. But who was this man? How did he destroy a city so powerful, so protected, and so full of history? He didn't rely on brute force alone. No, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon knew something no one else knew. He used strategy, military psychology, and fear as his main weapons. Today, we're going to uncover the mystery of how one man dominated and destroyed Jerusalem. What did Nebuchadnezzar know that no one else knew? Let's find out, right now. Before we continue, if you love studying the Bible and want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel Disciples of the Bible and leave a like. Let's explore together what Nebuchadnezzar did to destroy Jerusalem and what he knew that no one else knew. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, ruled an immense and powerful empire. But to understand how he destroyed Jerusalem, we need to look at his rise and how he prepared to dominate the world. Babylon wasn't just a strong military empire, it was also strategically positioned. Nebuchadnezzar knew that to secure his power, he had to control the trade routes and the key cities of the region. And Jerusalem, caught between two major powers, was the strategic center point. He didn't want Jerusalem only because of its walls. He wanted it because it represented both military strength and spiritual identity. Controlling Jerusalem meant controlling the region. He didn't want Jerusalem only because of its walls. He wanted it because it represented both military strength and spiritual identity. Controlling Jerusalem meant controlling the region. 9. Nebuchadnezzar knew Jerusalem would be the ultimate prize in his conquest. But to take it, he had to break more than physical defenses. He had to break the people's morale. So how did he do it? In 605 BC, after defeating Egypt at Carchemish, Nebuchadnezzar moved toward Jerusalem. But instead of attacking head-on, he made a calculated move. He sent a strategic demand to King Jehoiakim. Nebuchadnezzar demanded that several noble young men from Jerusalem be sent to Babylon. What looked like a simple diplomatic request hid a calculated strategy. He didn't want prisoners. He wanted to shape the city's future. Among those taken was Daniel, along with his three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They were the brightest and most promising. And Nebuchadnezzar knew that by bringing them to Babylon, he could ensure the next generation of leaders wouldn't be raised in Jerusalem, but under his control. With that single move, Nebuchadnezzar didn't just weaken Jerusalem, he damaged its ability to rise again. The city's elite was now under Babylon's influence, and Jerusalem grew more vulnerable by the day. But the rebellion of Jehoiakim, son of Jehoiakim, against Babylon became Jerusalem's fatal mistake. He aligned with Egypt, openly challenging Nebuchadnezzar, and Babylon answered with full force. Nebuchadnezzar marched his army toward Jerusalem, and this time there were no more negotiations. The siege was immediate and relentless. The city was surrounded, and Babylon cut off the supply routes to break the people's morale. For months, the siege dragged on, and Jerusalem, desperate and exhausted, began to break. Jehoiakim, the young king, couldn't hold out. He surrendered to Nebuchadnezzar, the city was plundered, and Nebuchadnezzar took 10,000 captives, once again dismantling Jerusalem's leadership. After Jehoiakim, Zedekiah, the new king of Jerusalem, ruled under Babylon's domination. He paid tribute, kept the peace, and saw himself as a vassal king under Babylon. But over time, internal pressure grew. The people felt oppressed and began to push toward rebellion. With promises from Egypt, Zedekiah, blinded by hope in an alliance, broke his covenant with Nebuchadnezzar. That was the fatal mistake. Zedekiah had challenged an empire that seemed unstoppable. Babylon would never allow it. Nebuchadnezzar didn't just want to punish him. He wanted to show the world that no one defied Babylon and survived. And now, furious, the Babylonian king marched against Jerusalem again. This time, there would be no mercy. The siege of Jerusalem was total. Nebuchadnezzar surrounded the city with overwhelming forces, allowing nothing and no one to leave. Jerusalem was cut off, pressure inside the walls kept rising, and famine began to take over. Under Nebuchadnezzar's command, Babylon used relentless siege tactics. Massive battering rams, siege towers and catapults pounded the defenses, while sappers dug tunnels to weaken the walls. For months, Jerusalem resisted, but fear and hunger slowly drained the defenders' strength. Then the walls gave way. The city was taken, and organized resistance collapsed within hours of the breach. Zedekiah, desperate, tried to escape, but he was captured. Before he was taken to Babylon, he was forced to watch his sons die, and then he was blinded and led away as a prisoner. Nebuchadnezzar had conquered Jerusalem. Not only physically, but spiritually, the people of Jerusalem were completely defeated. With the city fallen, Nebuchadnezzar gave the order to destroy Solomon's temple. The greatest symbol of Jewish faith was set on fire, and its treasures were looted. The gold, the silver, and the sacred items of the temple were carried off to Babylon. The bronze sea, the bronze pillars, and every valuable piece was dismantled and transported to the Babylonian Empire. But the destruction didn't stop there. By destroying the temple, what represented God's presence among his people, Nebuchadnezzar shattered Jerusalem's soul. Faith was shaken, and the city, now without its spiritual heart, seemed to lose all hope. The plunder was meticulous, and the temple was left in ruins. But the greatest humiliation was the fire that consumed the holy place. Jerusalem was now a city without a soul, without its greatest symbol of faith and strength. With the city in ruins, Nebuchadnezzar deported Jerusalem's people once again. The elite, including princes and leaders, were taken away to Babylon. 10,000 captives were taken into exile, including craftsmen, soldiers, and intellectuals. Nebuchadnezzar didn't just want to defeat the city, he wanted to make sure Jerusalem would never become a threat again. By removing its leaders, he destroyed the city's ability to rebuild. The poor were left behind. Jerusalem was abandoned. Nothing remained but ruins and the memories of a fallen kingdom. The city that had once been vibrant and full of life was now desolate. The walls were shattered, the temple was burned, and the people were scattered across the world like refugees. Nebuchadnezzar had completed his mission. Jerusalem was left without leaders, without structure, without resources, and without strength to rise again. It didn't lose only stones and walls. It lost direction, leadership, and hope. To ensure Jerusalem would never be a threat again, Babylon made a strategic move. It removed what keeps a nation alive: wealth, organization, and capability. This wasn't just conquest, it was the prevention of any comeback. The plunder was meticulous and systematic. Everything valuable was separated, dismantled, and transported. Gold, silver, and the major elements of the temple taken away like parts stripped from a defeated empire. Even the bronze sea, a symbol of greatness and strength, was destroyed and turned into cargo. What once was majesty became spoil. Jerusalem was being dismantled completely, inside and out. And then it became clear, this wasn't only a military victory, it was a spiritual humiliation. Without the temple, Jerusalem lost its greatest symbol of faith and identity. The heart of the nation had been torn out. The city was left empty, without a center, without leadership, without what sustained its life. For the people, it felt like the end. For Nebuchadnezzar, it was final proof that no one defied Babylon and remained standing. But the Bible shows that even when everything seems finished, God is still in control. The destruction was not the end of God's people's story. Jeremiah had already warned this would happen because of disobedience and hardness of heart, and yet he also declared that the captivity would not last forever. Jeremiah spoke of restoration. Even with Jerusalem destroyed, God had not given up on his people. The discipline would be severe, but it would have a purpose. The promise was clear: there would be a return, there would be a new beginning, there would be rebuilding. And when it happened, it wouldn't be just a work of stones, it would be a spiritual transformation. Because God's greatest goal was never simply to keep a city standing, but to raise up a people with true faith, repentance, and dependence on the Lord. Jerusalem's fall became a historical and spiritual lesson. When a people abandon God, everything can collapse, on the outside and on the inside. But it also became a proof of hope. God corrects, but he does not abandon. God disciplines, and he also restores. And that's why this story doesn't end in ashes. It points to a future where God can still raise up what was destroyed. Even when it feels like nothing is left, God is still God, and his promise still stands. The real question is, what does this story teach us today? About faith, about choices, and about the cost of turning away from the Lord. Jerusalem fell, but that fall wasn't only about walls. It was a spiritual warning, and yet, in the middle of the ashes, the Bible leaves us with one certainty. God is still guiding the story, and hope did not die there. Because the promise doesn't end in destruction, God disciplines, but he also restores. And when he decides to raise something up, no one can stop it. If this story hit you hard, I want to know, what did you learn from Jerusalem's destruction? How do faith and hope show up even in the darkest days? Write it in the comments. And now comes the question that changes everything. Was Jerusalem rebuilt? If you want the continuation, comment right now. I want part 2. In part 2, I'll show you how God opened the way for the return and how Jerusalem began to rise again from the ashes. See you in the next video. God bless you.